On the morning of my mother's double mastectomy, she told me, "I feel like I am saying goodbye to my womanhood." These words struck me deeply. Why should our society tell my mother that her femininity must reside in her physical body, that her womanhood could be taken away? I felt torn by the way our social constructs of gender and beauty should limit her identity and self-worth to her body, and yet I understood that her lived experience with these sentiments was valid and real. As a student looking to pursue a career in medicine, I wanted to better understand how illness and disease intersect with gender and other social identities. In a society that has determined our identity and self-worth are irrevocably tied to our bodies, how do cancer patients retain or reimagine their sense of self throughout the illness experience? These are questions that motivated me to pursue Body and Face, a community-engaged photographic portraiture initiative which explores the relationships between illness experiences and the body, gender, survivorship, and other intertwined aspects of identity. I sought to use portraiture to explore the way patients navigated their identities while experiencing medical treatments that altered or took away physical parts of their body. The process of Body and Face draws on narrative interviews with 7 breast cancer patients and survivors, which are used to inform portrait sessions with each participant. By connecting with individuals, inviting them to share their stories, and giving them a new power in the photographic process, I aim to create a narrative, person-centered body of work that informs us of perspectives and emotions that are seldom discussed in healthcare spaces and in broader society. As an interdisciplinary community-engaged project, Body and Face draws on 3 broad disciplines to inform its artistic process. The first is health and medicine, which provides the motivation to examine the subject of illness experience. I spent my last 4 years at Stanford studying the social determinants of health, or the non-medical conditions that influence health outcomes. Factors such as income, wealth, education, environment, race, gender, sexuality, healthcare access, insurance, and social support all play a role in determining the health struggles that a person may face throughout their lifetime and the way that they navigate the healthcare system. Our growing understanding of the social determinants brings to light the need for patient-centered care, in which a patient's individual specific needs and desired outcomes are the driving force behind healthcare decisions rather than their generalized diagnosis. But we spent less time thinking about how these social determinants might influence the broader experience that a patient has as they navigate their illness. The discipline of health and medicine places importance on understanding how the illness experience deeply alters patients' everyday lives. Specifically, I sought to ask, how does medicine alter the relationship between one's body, their self-image, and self-esteem? In the midst of excruciating yet life-saving cancer treatment, what does it feel like to lose a physical part of yourself? How can observing and connecting through art help us develop complex understandings of the illness experience? The model of patient-centered care, an individualized, collaborative approach, ultimately provided a strong paralleled framework for my project methods. Second, social psychology informs the basis of my ethnographic research. As I conducted qualitative narrative interviews with my patients, I explored the question, how do social forces and identities such as gender, race, sexuality, and survivorship shape the way patients navigate struggle and loss? Conversely, how does loss influence their sense of self? As I interviewed these 7 women, I found that they were motivated to understand how they viewed themselves in the face of illness, pain, and the possibility of death. They struggled with feeling a loss of control over who they are as a person, their body, their appearance, and their ability to do what they love. Some participants showed that they were fighting to retain their sense of self, to maintain their appearance and traditional understanding of womanhood in order to resist change. But others grappled with redefining their identity throughout their treatment. They struggled with coming to terms with the changes that they had no control over, and they hoped to embrace what they called the new me. Throughout their struggles, many of them found ways to redefine femininity and womanhood. Importantly, this interview process showed me that each patient was eager to share their story, and the stories that I collected throughout this project were immensely diverse. As I entered the portrait stage of the project, I was determined to recognize each person's lived experience through the visual work and treat each session as a unique, self-standing reflection of the subject's personhood. This brings us to our final discipline, photography and portraiture. I found it essential to contextualize my work, which examines objectivity of the gendered body, within the social history of photography. Critical works such as these images by Carrie Mae Weems bring to light how photography has been abused throughout history to justify and uphold oppressive constructs of social identity. In this context, photography has exploited the body, constructing it as an object for observation and study, and in turn, the body has been exploited to reinforce subjugation. I read works by interdisciplinary comparative race scholar Anne Chang. In examining the historical subjugation of Asiatic femininity, Chang writes, "I want to think through, rather than shy away from, that intractable intimacy between being a person and being a thing." This question was essential to my approach to portraiture. What does it mean to be a subject in an artwork, to be conscious of yourself as a physical object being documented through art? Finally, I drew inspiration from Adrian Piper's Food for the Spirit. Piper took this series of 14 self-portrait photographs in 1971 while performing a temporary isolation in her New York loft, where she did yoga, fasted, and engaged with readings on metaphysical theory. Importantly, Piper's work also demonstrates that photography can be treated or interpreted as performance art. In Kate Palmer Alber's book Analyzing the Ephemerality of Photography, Albers writes that these photos by Piper gesture to an expanded photographic experience, a private impulse to render one's own materiality visible, thereby both visualizing the dissolution of the self and ensuring the opposite. Visually inspired by Food for the Spirit, and conscious of the power dynamic inherent in the history of portraiture, I was motivated to turn the conventional relationship between photographer and subject on its head. Given these women's reflections on self-image, loss of control, and the reconstruction of identity, I asked the question, what would happen if the subject was the one taking the photograph of themselves? The project quickly became centered around this integral process, using mirrors and self-portraiture to center the subject throughout the project's entirety. And this process gave rise to two findings. The first is the value in art driven by process and connection. From this interactive, subject-centered approach to portraiture, the result is a series of photographs visualizing self-image, introspection, and the return of agency over the subject's physical self. The process holds the power to visually answer the question, how does the subject see themselves? Even when the camera is in my hands, I feel a novel sense of empowerment and agency from the subject I'm photographing, which comes from the way they've chosen to open themselves up, shared parts of their journey with me, and show me how they want to be seen by the world and by themselves. This gives rise to a second, broader finding, which is that art has the power to serve as a force of healing and empowerment. A powerful example of this can be seen through my experience with Ariana. When I first met Ariana for our interview, she revealed to me that she had spent her whole life struggling with negative body image, which was deeply rooted in past trauma and abuse. "I always feel like I wasn't a woman," she told me. When she was diagnosed with breast cancer at the young age of 31, fighting the disease with chemotherapy and a double mastectomy caused her struggles with body image to resurface. Looking in the mirror at her flat chest after surgery, she told me that she felt guilty for being ashamed of her body. She recognized that her experience with breast cancer served as a catalyst that prompted her to finally seek therapy and work through these struggles. Though her battle with cancer was difficult and painful, she recognizes that it gave rise to a new direction in her life. As she began a journey to empower her relationship with her body, she saw our portrait session as an opportunity to confront her self-image and reclaim her body. "This is a big deal for me," she told me after we finished our portrait session. "To challenge myself and get to feel more comfortable in my body, I don't get this opportunity very often." Body and Face provides an opportunity to explore the way being made visible through the act of portraiture can be immensely healing and regenerative for people, especially when the process ensures they are being heard and seen with sensitivity and patience. As I wrapped up my research with these 7 women, each of them showed me that their unique relationships with cancer harbored immensely rich and complex experiences that they wanted to share with the world. To these patients and survivors, storytelling is an opportunity to build community support for others facing similar struggles and an empowering force for navigating illness and healing. I want to thank all of my mentors who supported me throughout the entirety of this project, especially when it became challenging logistically, artistically, and emotionally. Thank you so much, Adine, Daniela, and Jessie, for providing your constant support, especially when the project was challenging, when it was emotional or overwhelming, and I'm so happy that I stuck with it. I'm very grateful to the 7 women who opened themselves up to a stranger to share their story and create art with me, and were patient when we were experimenting or trying new things. And I'm always deeply grateful for my mom, who is my biggest supporter, my biggest role model, and the strongest woman I know.